As I was speaking before on the Primordial, how it came into being. Going back to Philo, who was born in the 3rd century, 5th century AD in Alexandria, Egypt. Philo had disciples and decided to expound to them the condemnation he felt was necessary to spread the myth of this condemnation upon the Ethiopians. But the Ethiopians were guilty of having proclaimed the covenant of the ark in their possession, and to state that God condescended itself, walked and talked with them thousands of years ago without any specific date in mind. Philo took up the challenge to want to suggest that there was no recognition or glory in the Ethiopians' claim. But nonetheless, the Ethiopians did not sway. Now keep in mind, because Ethiopia was known as the part of Egypt, the Upper Egypt, and then you had Egypt, the Lower Egypt, and yet they all merged together their theologic concept, their theologic approach, and they gave praise to the higher power greater than themselves. Well, that didn't sit well with Philo. He had the disciples, people who followed him, and start recognizing that he was a great author and giving him that glory. And he wrote against specifically the Ethiopians. And he said some very condemning things. But keep in mind, when you condemn one segment and of a specific ethnic group, in Africa, North Africa back then, it was only a matter of time who next will come into power and conquer and make subjugated the falling dominant civilization that preceded them. And so when Philo wrote his thesis on the condemnation of the Ethiopians as the furthermost, that furthermost geographically, that God could not have communicated with them. So keep in mind that in the diaspora structure, that you had your Ethiopians were brought into bondage, you had your Egyptian Nubians who were being phased out and being destroyed by Muhammad Ali, not the boxer, but a sultan who took reign and control and power. And he started killing off many, many Africans at will. And so this mythologic of the condemnation kept going as other ethnic groups, other religious orders were being produced. But the concept of the Ethiopians, the Africans, remained steadfast as the condemned people of the Hamitic group were destined to permanent dispensation and condemnation by God until God repeals it, not man. So man comes on board and says, well, we have a base reason to condemn and make mockery of anything that was created, manufactured, or discovered by the African stock. And so slavery was a part of the interim. Slavery had to come into existence when you had other groups who just fell by the wayside, did not show that much initiative and interest for their own well-being and their own subsistence. So who do you incorporate and adopt? The one who was condemned, they proclaim, and the one whom God will not answer to his cry when he asked that this curse is a myth and not have any relevance. But that was not listened or acknowledged by the conquered group. The conquered group came in, exploited the weak, the vulnerable, and destabilized their condition and brought them, the weak, in captivity and subjugated them to slavery and whatever else they felt was deemably necessary, because God will appropriate that will be the right form of action of harsh and cruel treatment dealt to the condemned. Well, the condemned was man-made. It was not something that as attempted to be justified by man's writing, that the condemnation of the African was justified for the reason we brought him to this new land and placed him in slavery, that if he worked hard, if he worked long, and if he goes seeking for a place and a destiny, he cannot go it without seeking for the dominant group who reign dominance and control and management and organization over him, that the vulnerable must appeal to the mercy of the strong. And so the strong, he came forward and he proclaimed, you must work your way up and work hard. That's the only way we would ever get a place of glory. But keep in mind, even at that, you are still condemned by the conscience of what our ancestors or what their ancestors have already placed in written words, written in the Bible, written in the Quran. Is even written in some of the tabernacle in the Torah today. And so other groups now begin to acknowledge the principle, practice of these religions, and once they see anyone, the reader would see this, he would automatically assume that this is a rightful place for the African.